Welcome to the Soaring Through Adversity podcast. Here's your host, Renee Bragelet.
The Soaring Through Adversity podcast is brought to you by Victory Advantage, a certified nonprofit where our mission is to provide pathways of hope and opportunities for successful independent living opportunities for those with cognitive and physical disabilities. Through candid conversations and insightful interviews, we provide a platform for their narratives to shine while empowering our listeners to take flight with awareness, empathy, and embodying living the Eagle Way. Today's episode is titled Faith, Flight, and Resilience. Today, my guest is my friend, Chuck Hoyle. Chuck was born in 1952 in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. Chuck's early life was marked by a love for sports and a desire to become a pilot. After completing his service in the Air Force, he pursued a career in aviation, eventually settling in California where he met and fell in love with Wanda. Despite a tragic plane crash that left him paralyzed, Wanda remained steadfast by his side, and they were married for a short period of time. His life took another turn when he returned to North Carolina, where he became a foster parent of 10 children. Remaining active in both body and spirit, he has immersed himself in various adaptive sports, including wheelchair basketball, hand cycling, and disabled water skiing. Wow, that's quite the bio. Chuck, are you ready to get into this?
Yeah.
So tell us about your home life, your childhood. I think you had some siblings also.
Yes, I had an older brother, 2 years older, and a sister that was 14 years younger than me.
14 years.
Yeah, born when I was a freshman in high school. My parents had always wanted a daughter, so were blessed with her.
Well,
And me and my older brother picked on her all the time, but she did good.
I bet y'all did. You took care of a baby, basically, in your
Yes,
household.
yes. She was a little one.
So I understand you played football and baseball in high school, but what
Yes.
was your passion even at that time?
Yeah, well, I like sports. I loved football, but I was small and slow, so I wasn't very good. But I loved to play. And I played baseball, and the same thing. I wasn't very good at it, but I enjoyed it. And flying was the thing that I wanted to do. I was determined to be a pilot, so that's why I tried to get in the Air Force Academy and finally succeeded.
How old were you when you first realized you wanted to be a pilot?
10.
10 years old. Where do you think that came from?
I don't know because none of my family were involved in it. I just remember standing outside watching airplanes fly over when I was a kid and thinking I want to do that. So, yeah.
So that journey, that passion led you into the U.S. Air Force Academy.
Yes.
Tell me about that journey.
Well, that was good. I was just a country boy from North Carolina. I was 17 when they accepted me, and I went out to Colorado, and it was quite a transition. I mean, this was 1970 when I got there, and they were still in the yell at you, stand up straight, be at attention mode for your whole freshman year. So it was quite a transition.
Well, let me ask you a question. Through all that transition, would you say that you had taken your faith with you? Because it seemed like you had a very strong faith-filled home growing up, and I would assume you did the same. So did you take your faith with you?
Yes, and there were opportunities there at the academy to plug in and to really stay involved and to follow God like I should have, but I strayed away from that. But I distinctly remember, especially in boot camp when we were out in the woods, remembering talking to God out in the beautiful environment out there.
So at that point, where did your faith go? Because I recall us having a conversation about how you ended up falling away from your faith.
Where did it go? You mean I think I just got caught up into doing all the fun things that I thought I wanted to do.
Because how old were you at that point?
18,
Oh, you
19.
were still sowing your wild oats.
Oh yeah, yeah, very much so.
You had told me that you were a good pilot, but not a great one.
Right.
Do you think you're being a little hard on yourself because you?
No, I think that's in when I graduated. If you look from pilot training in '75, that was the tail end of the Vietnam War, and they were looking for fighter pilots. So if you were a good pilot, see, and the Air Force picks what you do. When I came out of pilot training, if you were a good pilot, you went to fly fighter planes. If you weren't a good pilot, you went to fly bomber planes. If you could talk about flying real well and fly okay, they made you an instructor pilot, and that was me.
So you became an instructor
I
pilot.
was an instructor pilot, yes, from the start.
Well, let's fast forward because you go off to Mather Air Force Base in California
Yep.
and then to Fort Worth, Texas. And there you got plugged into a church where you met your first love. Tell me about that.
That was in California. Yes, I was 28 and had come back to the faith and I was at church and I met Wanda, and she was a, if you know anything about horse people, she was a horse person. She
Okay.
was she was raised in a very tough circumstances. Her parents didn't have a lot of money. She had a brother and a sister, and they lived pretty much hand to mouth. She would, when she was a teenager, she would walk up the road because they lived near a expensive area. She would walk up the road to where there were horses and offer to clean their stall if she could ride their horse. And so she would clean stalls and shovel, and then they'd let her ride the horse.
She found a way. She found a way. Smart woman.
Yes, and that I think that's what attracted me to her. She was a horse person, and she was a make it work kind of person. So we hit it off.
But didn't you have to go through a time where you had to wait for her?
Well, what happened was I was pretty much a Pharisee in those days, and when you turn from what you were doing and God gets a hold of you, I gave all that up, and I decided I'm not going back to that. So I decided she wasn't really on fire enough for God, so I broke up with her. It was me. And
Wow.
as I said, I realized after about a year that that was a mistake because I still loved her. And there were lots of, and I was again in my late 20s, there were lots of good Christian women around, but none of them appealed to me like she did. So I determined to wait, and I waited for a long time.
Well, thank God you're a patient man.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have much choice. My heart was already gone, so there wasn't much else I could do. I tried dating a couple of other Christian women, and it just wasn't there.
I like a man that follows his heart.
Well, a couple of my friends told me that in other nondescript ways that Chuck, you need to follow your heart wherever that is. And so okay.
That's
But
right.
there was faith there because she was still out and not in the church. And I was just waiting to see what would happen.
You did well. But tell me, you waited and you became a pilot again. You went from being an instructor to a pilot again. Is that right?
No, I'd always been a pilot. I was an
Oh, okay.
instructor pilot. When I got out of the Air Force, I moved back to North Carolina and got a job in Hickory, North Carolina, flying charter. um, Flew all over the Southeast and did some instructing. I felt led to go back to my church in California that I was in, and I went back there and flew. I was a part-time flight instructor and got my real estate broker's license and sold real estate. And I was also the youth pastor in the church, the little church that we were in. So it was a busy time for me.
So you say you got your real estate license?
Yes, yeah, I was a real estate broker.
My
Sold real estate
goodness.
in the '80s in California, which was pretty exciting because it was booming in those days.
Well, tell me about Wanda because something happened soon into your marriage.
Well, not it was before we were married. She had just come back to the church, and I wanted to make sure she was back for good for the right reasons, and gave it some time. And after she had been in the church for a while, I went and asked her. I said, I took her on a bike ride. I borrowed a bicycle for two, took her for a bike ride, and asked her, "Are you still interested in me?" And she said, "Yeah," kind of like that. So we got together, and a week later, I was now this is the church in Shingle Springs, California. About a week, exactly a week later, after I'd asked her that, a student of mine wanted to fly into his family airport up in the mountains, and we flew an airplane into there. We got in okay, but coming out, I made a mistake, and we hit a tree and crash landed in the woods. So the shoulder harness on mine failed, and it whipped me forward, and I broke my back at T10. Laying in the airplane, I knew that I was paralyzed, and I didn't want to live that way. So I thought I'd kill myself, but God came down and said, "No, Chuck, you're going to be okay. You're not going to like it, but you're going to be okay." So I waited, and I was in the airplane for like 8 hours before they found me. And
8 hours before they even found you.
yeah, we were up in the woods. They had to send a helicopter up to look for us because we were in the big trees up in California. And they came in and medevaced me out. Took me to UC Davis Medical Center, and Wanda came down to see me, and I told her, "Go away. You don't need a guy," because it'd only been a week. I mean, we'd only been together a week again. And
Oh, okay. So you had only been together for a week when you became paralyzed.
yes, and when she came down to see me, I mean, I was pretty busted up, and I told her to don't, just go away, find you another guy. And she said, "No, we'll stick it out. We'll make it work." So the church went along, and I was struggling. I struggled for that first year trying to with anybody with paralysis. That first 2 years they tell you is the hardest, and it was tough. Trying to figure out how to do what you need to do, go to the bathroom, take a shower, just the everyday things of life, and how to figure them out.
Yeah,
And
things that people take for granted.
exactly, getting up on a curb. In those days, the ADA was just getting cranked up, and you couldn't get into buildings, you couldn't get into stores. Um, I didn't have a car. I pushed my wheelchair back and forth to work. I was still trying to sell real estate, but same problems. And Wanda and I struggled through that. And Wanda, a year after our church, we were at the edge of the mountains of the Sierras, and we would go up every year and cut firewood for everybody, and we'd give firewood away from the church to people that needed firewood. And Wanda rode in a truck up with a young fella, and they were coming back down the hill when the truck she was riding in, the driver lost control. And there were a line of, how motorcycles will ride two beside each other?
Yes.
There were a line of motorcycles right beside them, and they swerved and they hit the motorcycles. It's interesting because it was September 2nd of 1988, 1989, 35 years ago this week that the accident occurred. It's still the largest accident in El Dorado County history. And Wanda was hit by truck that she was in was hit by motorcycles and blew up, and she was burned over 90% of her body. Interestingly enough, they just some of the people put those posts on Facebook about the accident again. And I talked last week to one of the paramedics, who was one of the first on the scene, and he talked to Wanda right after the accident. She was very badly burned. He said that she was burned over 90% of her body when he saw her. They took her to the same medevac her down to the hospital, same one I was in, UC Davis, and I went down there to see her. And by the time I got to her, she couldn't talk. It had already clogged her up so much.
Yes.
But I told her, "I'm here. I'm not leaving. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to stay with you through all this." Because she had stayed with me for that last year. I wanted her to know I was going to be there for her. So I spent the night in the hospital. The next morning, our pastor came down, and Wanda was still conscious. She could nod her head, was about all she could do. So I married her in the burn unit at the UC Davis Medical Center that morning.
So that's when y'all got married.
I wanted her to know that I wasn't going anywhere. So asked her, I said, "Would you marry me?" And she nodded her head. And the pastor asked her, "Will you take him?" The questions, and she nodded her head and smiled.
Yes.
But we had 2 or 3 conscious days for her, but they had her on so much morphine. After a few days, she was gone. And she died 3 weeks later in the hospital.
That had to have been an unimaginable pain that she was going through, and you as well,
Yes.
as you watched it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it was hard on her. You could tell she was in a lot of pain because she would shiver, and that she had basically no skin. Everything was, yeah, it was bad. And I was, 1 year in a wheelchair, and I was planning on marrying her, and then here this happens to her, and then she's gone. I was just devastated. And then the church fell apart because that was truck from the church that got the wood. So the motorcyclists all sued the church and everybody split. So the church I'd moved to California to join, I mean, within that period of time, I was in a wheelchair, the church was gone, and my fiance wife was gone. So it was a pretty dark time for me. I just knew that God would see us through it. So as you said, that there was another lady in the church, and we got together and married and moved back to North Carolina. And that's where me and her got into foster care and began adopting children.
That is a beautiful story. So, we've talked about the terrible tragedies, and now we're going to get into a different part of Chuck's life, but let's take a break.
The Soaring Through Adversity podcast is presented by Victory in Time. Victory in Time's mission is to help executives, leaders, and business owners excel in their faith, lives, and work. Through speaking engagements, one-on-one mentoring, and our mastermind groups, known as Victory Circles, Victory in Time wants to help you become the best leader you can be. Find out more at victoryintime.com. Also, don't forget to pick up your copy of the Soaring Through Adversity book, Life Lessons to Lead Triumph and Rise Above. All net proceeds from sales of the Soaring Through Adversity book benefit Victory Advantage.
So, Chuck, you just
Yes, ma'am.
mentioned that you got remarried. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Well, I was in, as you can imagine, in pretty much of a hole from having been in a wheelchair. The church fell apart, and my wife had just died. So there was another lady came along, and within a year of Wanda's death, and she was very interested in me, and we got together, and I was still hurting pretty deeply. But
I
we got
bet.
married and decided that we would move back to North Carolina because there was nothing in California for either of us at that time. So we moved back to North Carolina where my family was. Again, remember, I'm a year and a half in a wheelchair now, and I wasn't sure how I would develop, how I would handle everything. So we moved. We built a house right behind my parents and near my brother, so there would be
Oh,
assistance for her, for me, in case I needed it.
so they became your support system.
Exactly. And it was my family has always been there. For my brother has been the best guy. He's like Superman. I can call him at any time. Mike, I'm stuck in a ditch, and he will be there for me. He's
I hope that
been.
doesn't happen often.
It does in a wheelchair. I mean, people can tell you get out of your car and put your wheelchair out, and it rolls down the hill. I've had that happen before. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of funny the things that happen.
Do you have a sense of humor?
He bails me out. Now Tyler's kind of taking that role where I keep my cell phone with me. Tyler, I'm
Yeah.
stuck down in the woods. Come get me, kind of stuff. So yeah,
Well, it's because you're active too, right?
yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, you got to do stuff for sure.
So, getting back to when you were married again, and it was in about a year. But then what did you guys do together?
Yeah. Well, I'll back up a little bit. When I was in the hospital in California after my accident, even before Wanda, I thought, well, Lord, what do you want me to do now? I can't be a pilot full time anymore. I can't really be a good real estate broker in a wheelchair. What do I do? And so I narrowed it down to go to seminary and be a pastor, go to get a counseling degree and be a psychologist, or go to law school and be a lawyer. And so I just went around and asked all my friends, what do you think? And they said, Chuck, you don't have the personality to be a pastor or a counselor. So I went to law school. I guess they were all saying I was a jerk, so it worked out well. I went to law school in California and managed to pass the California bar in '94. We were married shortly before I took the bar, and I took the California bar and moved back to North Carolina, anticipating I would come out and join the North Carolina bar.
Yes.
Turned out the North Carolina bar that year had decided they weren't taking outside lawyers anymore, only from select schools. So got a job as a paralegal. I worked in Charlotte, which is 30 miles away, as a paralegal, and my then wife wanted to adopt. So we got into Cleveland County foster care, the county we were in. We took the classes, and the need in Cleveland County is enormous. We had 2 children within a week when we finished the training.
2 children within a week. How old were they?
They were 2 and 3, half
Woo.
brother and half sister. Um, and we took them in first. The birth mother of both of them was pregnant at the time, and she had another child who was 5 years old who was in another foster home. So the plan was for all them, when she had the baby, for all them to go home. So we adopted a little boy out of Polk County, an adjacent county, who was free to be adopted. We adopted him. So we have 3 kids now, and he was 2, a 2, and a 3-year-old. The 5-year-old boy was having issues. My wife was very good with kids, so the DSS asked if we'd take the 5-year-old boy. So yeah, we'll take him until they all go home.
Okay, what was this time frame now between the 2 to the 3?
6 to 8 months.
Whew.
Yeah, it was close. It was tight.
Yes.
So we had 4 kids then. So the mother had the baby, and she couldn't handle it. So rather than all the kids go back to her, we got the baby also.
So that
And
made 5.
that's 5. We got 5 kids now. We got 4 boys and a girl. So, and they're all under 5 and under. We had 4 boys and a girl, and she said, we need another girl. We can't do with just these boys. So DSS was calling us a lot. They called her and said, we got a girl, but it's got a brother with her. She said, that's fine, we'll take them. So we got 2 more, a girl and a half brother there. So it gave us 7.
7.
So
I was, I was impressed how patient you are. She must have had the patience of Job at that point as
she was
well.
very good good with children, very good at it. I think, and as I'll get to, I think it just burned her out
Yeah.
because then she wanted a baby. So I said, if you can find an adoption agency to give you a baby with a guy in a wheelchair and 7 kids, go for it. I didn't imagine she found an 13-month-old up in New York that was premature, and they thought maybe had Down syndrome. So we said, we'll take her. We took her, and she was fine. There was really no issues. She had been in a nun's home, and every time she peeped, they carried her around. All the nuns carried her around. So she learned to walk and all that. The birth mother of the little girl was so distraught by giving her up for adoption that she then became pregnant again, and that was Tyler that I showed you a few minutes ago. She wanted us to adopt a little boy that came next, and we took him. That was Tyler that I live with now. So that's 9. And we adopted all of them.
Adopted 9 children. That is amazing.
It was quite a journey. And that's when, as I was saying, I think she burned out in there in 08 when we had the 9. And there were a lot of issues. The things that DSS doesn't tell you is the issues that you're going to deal with. And there was a lot of abuse. There's a lot of neglect. We had one of the boys that we adopted, a little boy, he had been in a crib for a year and had never been held.
Oh, that
So
poor
he had what they
child.
call reactive attachment disorder, which
Yes.
is he would not let you hold him. He just didn't want to be touched. So you have those kind of things that you have to overcome. So it was a very busy, you can imagine, time. And she just got stressed out and left me, and she still helped with the kids, but they were kind of in and out. She would be in and out with them.
How old were the kids when she left?
I think Tyler was 8, so they would have been 8 to about 16.
Okay.
We had a couple of the boys were already in group homes for therapy.
Mm-hmm.
They had been abused, and they needed full-time care for a while. I visited them every week, but they had to go to a group home for a time.
So they still knew they had a parent.
Yeah, and my sermon to them always was, I'm your dad. Whatever you like about that, I'm your dad. You have a fellow out there that's also your dad, that's birthed you. He's also your dad, but I'm your dad. So I wanted them to feel that, to know that I was there. My dad had always been that way for me. He had been there for me through the academy and everywhere I went. So I wanted them to feel that
So they
very
knew
much.
they were attached to you, that you were their father. That is
Yes,
sweet. That is
right.
sweet.
Whatever happens. Yeah, exactly.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So you were talking about when you came back to North Carolina and you became a paralegal. What happened after that? Is that still what you do for a living, or has
Oh,
something
yeah.
changed there as
No,
well?
uh, a fellow that I know, local representative in the House, North Carolina House, he told me, he said, Chuck, did you ever get to take the bar? And I said, no. I had the job in Charlotte. I got a job in Shelby, which is local, and I was working for a law firm there. And everybody knew I had a license. I just couldn't practice law here. I could practice in California, but not here.
Yes.
So he passed some legislation or got some legislation pushed through that all the states have adopted, where if you've been a lawyer for 10 years in one jurisdiction, you can take the bar in the other jurisdiction. So that enabled me
Oh.
to take the bar in 2016. I wasn't sure at 62 whether I could pass the bar or not again, but I managed to. I passed the bar in North Carolina. I've been a lawyer since 2016 here in North Carolina.
You just don't let anything stop you.
Well, I was determined to take the bar. And before that, when I knew I wasn't going to be back in 2000, I was only like 2 courses away from a CPA ticket. So I went to UNC at Charlotte, and took a couple of classes, and then took the CPA exam and managed to pass that in '01. So I'd been a certified public accountant since '01, and then passed the bar in 2016. So I was always good at taking tests. I can't make a lot of money at it, but I was good at taking tests.
But wouldn't you say that that is one of the major things that has kept you going? I mean, of course, your children did, but your
Yeah,
employment, your job, everybody needs a reason to get out of bed in the morning, right?
yes, I agree. And I've always liked, and I still like, even at my age, I still let people say, "Aren't you going to retire?" I said, "No, I enjoy what I do, and I I still like doing it, and I like helping people." The position of lawyer, the thing I like about it is it really puts me in a position to help people. That and the CPA ticket, I do the Robin Hood theory, as I call it. Whereas if you've got money and you make more than I do, then I'm going to charge you for it. If you're a orphan, if you're an
What did you
orphan,
call that? What did you call that?
Robin Hood, rob from the rich and give to the poor.
Yes.
So I don't rob the rich. I charge them fair rates. But if you're an orphan or a widow or you're in need, I'll do your tax return for free, or I'll do your will or trust or whatever for free. So that's kind of how I operate. Uh,
Heart of gold. Heart of
well, I
gold.
don't know about that, but I feel like that's what God's given me the ability to do, and I can do that.
Well, when I met you at Johnny and Friends, which is a disability ministry, very large organization based out of California that has satellite locations across the country. And we were at a disability retreat. And one of the things I first noticed about you was you're in shape. You have definitely continued your active lifestyle. You're still active in swimming, skiing, weightlifting, and hand cycling.
I went water skiing this morning.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know
Yeah,
you did Wake the World not too long ago, but you went skiing this morning.
yes, it was fun. It was a little chilly.
Yeah, we did have some fall temperatures yesterday
Yes,
afternoon and this morning, didn't we?
yeah. Yeah, Wake the World has been wonderful. We had our event August 26th, a couple of weeks ago, and I have it on my local lake. It's about 2 miles from here, Moss Lake. It's a city lake. It's a pretty big municipal kind of lake,
Yeah.
but the city allows me to have the event there. We started it in 2018, and we last 2 years ago we had 4 skiers,
Yes.
disabled skiers that we skied. Last year we had 6. This year we had 12. So we had a good turnout. A lot of people got them done. It went really, really well. I had a really good time.
So, would you like to tell the listeners how they could learn more about Wake for the World?
Oh, sure. Waketheworld.org, and it's got a list of the events. They're all over the country. And adaptive sports, you can go online and find us anywhere on adaptive water skiing, or waketheworld.org, and find me on the Moss Lake. And I would encourage anybody, any parent, if you've got a child that's disabled. We had a little boy that I ran into at the YMCA. He's 10. His name was Daniel. And I said, "Hey," I asked his mom, "Says he water ski?" And they said, "He loves the water." I said, "Well, bring him out." They brought him out for the first time. He had never done it before, and he skied 3 times. He has cerebral palsy. Um, and you remember from the event from Johnny and Friends, Macy, the little bitty girl in the wheelchair?
Yes, I do.
She came. And to tell you that story, it was a great story. She was so little, she's 50 pounds. Okay. we had one of the lady skiers out there put her on her lap, and they side skied her with Macy on her lap. Well, Macy came back and told her mom she wanted to do it by herself. So the next time we put her in a ski by herself, and she and two side skiers, and they skied her around. So Macy went 3 times. So it was great.
That has got to feel so freeing.
Oh yes. I'm glad you said that because that's what it was for me. The first time I skied, I remembered, wow, I'm not in a wheelchair. And that today when I went out, I mean, free. I'm skiing like everybody else. I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm not disabled. It just makes you feel so much freer. And to watch the faces of the kids and the people that participate in our event, just to see their face and their smile. They said that Daniel, the 10-year-old boy I was talking about, they said he giggled the whole time. They had him out on the lake.
Well, Chuck, you have brought tears to my eyes. I have to be honest. That's a beautiful story. And I was in a wheelchair for a short period of time, I will call
Yeah.
it. And I remember just sitting in the car for the first time and not in a wheelchair. I was a passenger. I had to wait quite a while before I was able to drive, but I remember just riding home from the hospital and thinking, this feels normal.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but don't have the courage or didn't have the courage and wouldn't have the courage now to go skiing. But I admire you guys. I
You should
admire
come
you.
try it. All you got to do is sit there. We'll ski you. We'll get you
Hey,
out.
I might try to do that.
Let me say this: Macy's mother, when
Hmm.
Macy, the little girl I talked about, when she got done the third time, her mother came down. I said, "Does she want to go again?" Because she'd been 3 times, and she said, "Yes, she wants to go again, but she can't keep her head up. She's so tired."
Oh, is this an event that happens once a year?
Once a year, I do it the last Monday of August. School has started. The fishermen generally aren't as much on the lake, and I do it on a Monday because there's nobody out there, so it's nice and quiet.
Chuck, I think I might take you up on that.
Come out and do it. Yeah.
That sounds exciting. Well, what is your greatest lesson learned through your entire journey?
There's a book called, and I wanted to get the quote out, Shantung Compound. Do you remember the movie about the runner Chariots of Fire? You remember
Yes,
that movie, Chariots of Fire? At the end
yes.
of the movie, if you watched it, it says he died in a Japanese compound at the end of the war. Shantung Compound was a place where he died. And that book was written about it. It wasn't written about him, it was written about the Shantung Compound. And the author talks about how he lived through that time being in prison and um, all that happened. And at the end of the book, he says, the things that happen to us are not looked for or not, we don't want them, but they often create a better life and help us to see life in a deeper way than we would have seen any other way. And I keep that quote out in front of me. It's a long quote, and I
Yes.
can't do it all, but that's basically that it's not what you wanted, but it gives you a deeper life than you would have lived otherwise. And that's what God has done for you. So that's my philosophy that you don't like it, like God said to me in the first time. You're not going to like it, but you're going to be okay.
Well, what hopes and aspirations do you have for the future for people that have spinal cord injuries?
Well, certainly I would hope that they that they come up with a cure or a way to fix it, but that doesn't look possible given the nerve tissue and what gets damaged. I don't know that they can physically or they can get that done, but I would love that first. If not, then I would just hope that they were able to adapt and do. One of the things that I heard early on was don't focus on the 10,000 things you can't do. Focus on the 10,000 things you can do and do those. And that's why water ski, hand cycling, wheelchair, there's lots of things. If you watch the Paralympics now, you can see lots of that of people who have adapted and done well and overcome whatever adversity they had. And that's what I would encourage people to do. And I hope that people are able to do.
It's a new normal, trying to
Yeah,
create that normalcy in a new way.
yes. And often people in wheelchairs, as hard as it is, they're in better shape than a lot of the kids who are normal. I mean, you look at the suicide rate among teenagers; they're not happy, and I think sometimes we have to have obstacles in order to really live the deepest life that we can live.
Yes, I think that we learned that things aren't perfect
Yes.
in this world, but we have to adapt and we have to keep our faith to keep it going. How have the experiences shaped the perspective on your life?
Well, just that I see things differently now, and uh, when I think about the next thing coming, I look at the opportunity to do it instead of, oh no, that's an obstacle. And I when I see people in wheelchairs or with any kind of disability, I really relate to them better. I just, I want to attach to them instead of feeling, oh, I wonder if they're okay. I want to know that they're okay and go check on them and relate to them.
So you speak to them, you
Oh
talk
yeah,
to them, you show
yeah.
them respect.
That's why I like Johnny and Friends so much. I mean, the little kids and stuff that, yeah, you were there. You know how that is. That's just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I call that a little slice of heaven.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've dealt with a lot in your life. I mean, disability wise, so you understand that.
That yes, I have, and I feel very blessed to be here. And I limp when I walk, but I say I refuse to limp through life. So
There you
that's
go.
just part of it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
I believe he left me here for a reason, and one of the reasons is to do this podcast. And I believe and talk to wonderful people like yourself, and promote the Victory Advantage Foundation that is here to help people live independent lives, just like you do,
good for you.
in a time when it is so expensive to try to find a place to live. What do they do? And we see this at Johnny and Friends, where they have children and they're aging and they don't know what's going to happen because they now live with them and they can't afford to move out, though they have the capability or the capacity to do so.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm so proud that the Victory Advantage is able to help assist with things like the home modifications where they can stay in their own home, transportation opportunities, employment, which I think is so important.
yes,
And I think my husband's favorite part of the foundation is the fact that he's always had a dream to help people with an entrepreneurial spirit start their own business.
yeah,
And what better way to do that than with people with disabilities? So we're real excited about it.
great.
But I got one last question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Where do you draw your greatest strength?
Jesus. I mean, my God has been faithful to me through all this, through Wanda to foster kids, through disability, through everything I've been through. Um, God has always been faithful. Not in the way that I anticipated, not in the way that you would think that it would be. I didn't get to stand up and walk like the guy in John 5, but God has been faithful to me through all of it. That's my strength.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for being my guest today.
Thank you.
Each week, I define my guest with one of the many leadership traits of an eagle, known as living the eagle way. Chuck, you are the definition of an eagle with keen eyesight, a visionary. In the midst of your own tragedies and triumph, you have a sharp perception and are attentive and ready to react to the needs of others. Thank you for being my guest today. You are truly an inspiration. And thank you to our listeners for your valuable time. Follow us on this platform for new episodes of the Soaring Through Adversity podcast, published on the first day of each month. To donate, be a board member, or volunteer your time and talent, or apply for a grant to assist people with disabilities to live independently, please visit thevictoryadvantage.org. Once again, that is thevictoryadvantage.org. And always remember, faith first, not last, and living the eagle way will lead to victory in time.